do it.
Welcome, everybody. This is another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. And hello, Annie. And we have our guest, Erin Riley, tonight, and Annie's going to introduce her.
Hey, folks. We are super delighted to welcome Erin to the podcast this evening. She is a writer, a student, a professional communicator, and, of course, very importantly, probably the best job of all, a parent. She's really interested in how to make the world a better place and whatever she can do to help anyone get there. Erin's in her second year of PhD in communication at UTS, looking at developing best practice for engaging with stakeholders who are hurt by public policy decisions. Frankly, there's a lot of that going on. We could probably talk for about 4 hours just on that alone. And she's also the co-founder of an incredible company called Find a Bed, which is an organization that matches people who've been affected by bushfires and people who can provide accommodation or help in other ways. Erin has written extensively about issues from sport and gender to parenting and baking, also important. Her work has appeared in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, ABC Online, SBS, The Guardian, and she's also the media lead for the 2017 Women's March in Sydney, which I actually didn't know, Erin. Yeah. I learned something new every day about. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's such a great way to end the week, isn't it?
Oh, it's lovely.
It's nice having something to look forward to. And
it's the perfect weather for it. It's just the right weather to sit around and have a chat.
Because I've had a hard week, so I needed...
You've had a hard week. So first question, Kate, what are you drinking?
I am drinking something called 8 at the Gate.
Oh, I've had that before. It's quite nice.
A 2015 Sav from South Australia.
I am drinking a Jones Block McLaren Vale Shiraz 2018. It's very nice. I'm about halfway through it already. By the way, I haven't drunk half a bottle of wine already. It is only just after 7:30 in the evening. I started it yesterday. I'm not a complete pisshead. Erin, what are you drinking?
I am having a Negroni made by my partner, who is quite the excellent Negroni maker.
Nice. That's good skill.
We got very into them last year during lockdown.
Excellent. It's good that you've got them trained. That's an excellent thing.
I'm not complaining.
Do you want to ask the first question, Kate?
I will, and because you've got such a full agenda with all of those things that you're doing, I'm going to ask about do you practice self-care, and if you do, what do you do, and why do you do it?
I do. I try really hard to make time for exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week. And I have been going to the gym fairly regularly for the last year, which I find is really important for me. It makes a real difference in how I'm feeling, and it really is the time that's just for me. I'm also an obsessive bath taker. I love a bath. If I go more than 2 or 3 days without a bath, I don't feel right. So fortunately, we live in a shed. It's a bit of a long story, but we don't actually have a shower. We just have a bath. So at the moment, I pretty much have a bath every day. And that sort of 45 minutes is really crucial for me.
You are speaking, not to me, by the way, because I'm perimenopausal. I can't go anywhere near anything hot. However, Kate is also a beloved lover of baths, aren't you, my friend?
I have a rubbish bathtub, so I go to Annie's place.
We have really nice ones here, and guests frequently come just to have a bath.
That is excellent. I love that.
I'm gonna have to ask you the question about why you're living in a shed later on. But my other, this is my favorite question I always like to ask. If you could go back to your younger self and tell yourself something that you wished you'd known back then that you know now, what would you tell yourself?
This is a really silly one, but I really wish someone had told me this at 21. Don't drink at a work function. I made so many mistakes by drinking at work functions, and there is nothing that, yes, it was free booze. I could have spent $10 on a bottle of wine and had the same amount of alcohol and saved myself so many red faces at work. maybe once, but as a woman in my mid to late 30s, I genuinely wish I could tell 25-year-old Erin, just don't. Just save it for when you're with friends.
Yeah, it's a really sensible point. And I'm sitting here going, in fact, probably the worst story I've got from drinking to excess at a work function. I actually ended up in hospital with I needed stitches in my head, and I'd broken 2 ribs from accidentally falling off a wall in Sardinia, of all places.
Oh dear.
So I ended up in hospital. Yeah, waking up in a random kind of hospital bed, and this nurse was speaking in Italian at me, and I was like, I don't know where I am. I was also hungover, and she was gluing part of my head back together. Yeah, don't drink at work functions,
Don't drink
girls.
at work functions. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, I agree. And it took me a few
advice.
years to work it out too.
Yeah, honestly, at any time a young woman, in particular women, who asks me for advice in their career, that's one of the things I say. I'm like, just trust me. Leave early, buy a glass of wine, like buy a bottle of wine on the way home. You will thank me later.
Yeah. That's good advice.
So, Erin, what made you kind of go back into studying again? What was it that sort of made you go and start doing a PhD?
So the shed and the PhD are all sort of related.
That's good, because we want to know about the shed.
Yeah, so it's kind of a single story in a way. Actually, I should jump back a little way. So I have a 4.5-year-old, almost. And she was a bit of a surprise. I had been dating my partner for about 6 weeks when I fell pregnant. And I have PCOS, so it wasn't supposed to be very easy for me to fall pregnant, and I was on the pill. And so I was 32 at the time, and I thought, might not happen again. This might be my only chance. And so in conversation with my then very new boyfriend, who is now my partner of 5 years, we decided to have the baby and try and work it out together. So all of that was very surprising. I had just quit my government job where I had really good maternity leave and benefits to go and pursue my dream of writing full time. So I had no maternity leave, nothing. Yeah, it was a pretty difficult time. And then we moved to Panania. So we were living in the inner city at the time. Then we moved to Panania. And after about 18 months there, we were struggling a bit, working out this parenting and living together and all these bits and pieces. So we decided to move into the shed at my parents' house. Now, it's a nice shed. It's a 3-bedroom apartment in a shed, but it is a shed. I have the mice to prove it, particularly with the mouse plague at the moment. But yeah, so we moved out here, and it was only supposed to be for 12 months so we could sort of get on our feet, get financially ahead a little bit, and just settle down. And that was almost 3 years ago. After about 12 months, my father was diagnosed with motor neuron disease. So he was diagnosed almost 2 years ago now. And that changed a lot of things. I was working long hours on site for a construction company doing community engagement. So it was sort of 3 to 4 hours a day of commuting plus 10-hour days. And I wanted time with my dad. So rather than getting out of there, pursuing the big bucks, all those sorts of things, I decided to go back to uni, and we decided to stay in the shed for a while, and I sort of always wanted to study more and had this idea. I spent some time doing working compulsory acquisition of property on the practitioner side, and I thought there needs to be some more evidence-based practice for it. So I could see that there was a real gap in the research, and so I applied and got a scholarship, and the rest is history.
That's interesting. I hadn't realised that was the genesis of it.
Yeah, it's sort of it was very much about lifestyle, and because I had decided I wanted to I knew I wanted to study at some point, and it just felt like the right time. So it's really good. It means that I can get my daughter from daycare early, and she can have afternoons with my dad, and they can play together while he's still able to. And I can support my mum because she needs a bit of help caring for him. So that's sort of the defining factor of our lives at the moment.
It's always interesting to me how women feel like they have options to do things like this, and it's a valid choice for women.
Yeah, and it's sort of that catch-22 where it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to take sort of a career break, for want of a better term, so I can have that time, but also feeling the pressure to be a carer, because I've got 2 younger brothers, and I definitely think I feel the need to care probably differently than they do. I certainly feel like they both still feel it, but I definitely think the role is a bit different.
It's interesting you say that, Erin, because you probably know this. I've just got back from being in the UK for 6 months because my dad got diagnosed with leukemia, and it was just my instant reaction was, okay, well, I'm going back to the UK for a while. I don't know how long, but I can't just leave mum to do that by herself. And I'm not saying that my brother didn't want to help out, and of course he has, and he does. And this is a marathon, not a sprint, as well. And I could take that 6 months right now, but he couldn't at the time. So it was just like it was an obvious choice that I would go do that. But there's not one moment in my brain that went, is this the right thing to do? It was literally just an instant gut reaction of, well, I'm be booking a flight right now. And then there were a couple of people, like Kate and other friends going, you just need to make sure you do it in the right way so that they let you back in again when you want to come back. It was, and I'm grateful that I had that flexibility in my work schedule and all the other things to be able to go do it. But it was just, I'm going, and I'm going to be there to help, not like similar to what you just said, Erin, as well, that it's not just about your dad, it's also about my mum, and making sure she had someone that she could rely on too.
Yeah. And honestly, what I do is not very big. It's things like we've got chickens, and I feed the chickens in the morning so she doesn't have to get out of bed, and it's just the little things, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do them and to be here.
Well, it's nice to be able to be there and to be around. My parents both died really suddenly, and I didn't have a chance for any farewells. And I'm kind of jealous a bit of people who have that opportunity.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
My dad lost his mum very suddenly when he was about my age, and I am just really grateful for time where you can be conscious of the fact it's special.
Yeah, so well said. So how long? You're about 2 years into your PhD, was it?
I'm just starting my 2nd year, so just 1 year down.
Oh, just one year left then.
Sorry?
And what's the plan? It's just 1 year to go.
Just 1 year to go.
No, 2 years to go. 1 year down, 2 years to go. I've just finished my first year. We had a big presentation last Friday, and that was sort of at UTS, you have to do a presentation every year to progress to the next year, and a paper, write a paper. And so that was all wrapped up last Friday. So I was a bit of a stressful wreck for about the last 4 months. I feel like I'm walking about 3 inches taller since last Friday. So I had a bit of a week off this week. Not that it was an actual week off, but it was a week off uni work. And then
how did the presentation go? What was?
I think it went well. I have a bit of a problem as a ex-comms person. I'm used to being really succinct. And so I have really struggled to transition to academic writing because it's so not like that. And this presentation was supposed to be 30 minutes. And I thought, I don't have 30 minutes of content. I'm going to bore everyone with silly details if I go on for 30 minutes. So I wound up only going for 20 and they said it was fine. But that is something I've really, really struggled with because I'm used to, 400 or 600 words, 10, 20-minute presentations. The idea of speaking for 30 minutes about one thing is really new to me.
That's something
I've not thought of that.
Because I've always stayed sort of in academia. I've never, and but I've done comms, so I've done both in parallel. But I just think of them as different worlds.
They're entirely different worlds and they're entirely different skill sets. So it's really humbling to be someone who, I pride myself on being a good writer. And then to get feedback from my supervisor being like, this is terribly written. But I can write. It's been a real challenge and a real sort of ego thing. And I've wound up doing a lot of reading about mindset and resilience and that kind of stick with it thing that I haven't really always had. So it's been I've been amazed at that part of it. I wasn't anticipating so much personal growth. You kind of think, I've been business, worked for 15 years. I've done a lot of tough jobs. What is there to learn? And so much to learn.
It's good to obviously be learning and challenging yourself, I guess. But what's the thing that you want to do with the PhD after you get it? Because you obviously will.
I have this idea. My dream life is teaching a third of the time, consulting around comms that I care about a third of the time, and baking about a third of the time. That's that's the dream. I think hopefully at the end it'll be more like 50-50, the comms and the teaching, and then maybe the baking can work its way in a little bit later. Side. Yeah.
I love baking.
Have you mainlined all of the Great British Bake Off shows?
Of course, it's fantastic. No, so I do a particular kind of cookie decorating. So I do royal icing decorating. That's my little niche. Yep. So I do these very, I'm not very good by any stretch of the imagination. I'm in these groups and some of the women in there, because it's almost all women, are just artists. And they do these incredible things, but I'm learning and it's been a really lovely outlet for me. But we don't actually have a kitchen in the shed. So I can only do and it takes a long time to do these biscuits. So I can only do them so we're in the shed and mum and dad are in the main house. So I can only do them when mum and dad are away. So every time they're like, I'm like, when are you going away again? When are you going? And then I block out the day just to bake.
Love it. I love that you've got something else that's very different to, your sort of your main skill set. Work skill set, I guess, yeah. Of writing and comms and the PhD. It's something that I'm always fascinated by, people who are creative in lots and lots of different ways, because I'm not at all. I'm practical and I can help people build stuff and can talk for hours. Interestingly, 30 minutes, that's not a problem. I can fill that. But I can hike and I can be outdoors, and I'm terribly practical. So, if whatever your other skill set is, just, I don't know, something terribly practical, I'd be totally fine. Baking, not so much.
I find I actually get it. It is kind of a form of self-care for me, actually. If I don't bake, I have to be doing something that isn't to do with writing, that is creative, because writing is so much work now, or as in it's so associated with work. I do need to find my creative outlet somewhere else. So I also sew. That's my other outlet.
Interesting. I want to ask you about the beds thing, though.
Yeah.
Find a bed.
Yeah. So, because I remember watching on Twitter as it kind of unfolded and unfurled. It was really interesting.
Yeah, it was not what I'd planned to do that New Year's Eve. I actually had guests over. And I kept having to excuse myself to check to make sure what was going on. Yeah, so it started. Do you want the whole story?
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yeah. So it started. So where we live, we were not far from the Greenwater Creek fire, and I knew a lot of people nearby were evacuating, and because we're on 5 acres, I thought, well, if people are evacuating with their horses, they might need somewhere to come with a horse, because you can't really take a horse to an evacuation centre. I've since learned they actually set up evacuation centres where you can take your horse, but still, it's nicer not to be in an evacuation centre if you can avoid it. So I just tweeted that we had a place to stay, and a couple of hundred people retweeted it. And then a couple of people replied in the comments saying, we've got something similar, we're here, we're there, we're happy to help. I just thought, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so I set up 2 Google Forms that link to Google Spreadsheets and a Wix website, and it took about 45 minutes. And one said, I need a place to stay, and one said, I've got a place to stay, people can stay. And I actually originally called it Share a Bed. And then I realised that, no, that was probably not the best name for it. And then, yeah, within the first day, we were contacted by a lady by a woman whose husband was in his mid-70s and had been sleeping in his car the last 2 nights because he was stuck because the road was closed. Mm-hmm. And he was our very first match, and it went from there, and we wound up matching hundreds of people.
It was such a cool thing, and it was really amazing to see people just contributing to it in real life.
Yeah.
It really gives you hope for humanity when you see things like that.
It does. And I think the other thing that, though, for me that really always stood out was, I think you perhaps, and this is my observation from, obviously you and I have spoken about Find a Bed a lot, Erin, and you've been on a panel with me and things like that. But I wondered whether or not you were kind of a little bit surprised at how it sort of took off. But one of the things I love about a really good idea done at the right time with the right, sort of execution, it can take off, and it can take off so quickly because people can just, well, yes, this is the right thing to do. And you're absolutely right, Kate. It does show the right parts of humanity, and it literally did just completely snowball, didn't it?
Yeah, we had 8,500 people sign up to be hosts within 2 weeks. It was incredible. We would put
necessary, people were without places to sleep.
And were without places to sleep in really strange and specific ways. Like they were stuck in this particular suburb, and that suburb's local evacuation centre was completely full, and people were sleeping on the floor or in their car. So we needed someone in that suburb. So it really was this it wasn't that there was need and you could meet it broadly. It had to be this really specific thing. And we were just so fortunate that it did take off the way it did, and we were able to get so many people signed up on the list. And a lot of people were disappointed that they didn't get matched with someone, that they really wanted to host someone. And we had to say, we just have to match them with need.
Mm. And you had some really interesting kind of like random stories as well, didn't you? So do you want to tell them? My favorite one was still about getting the caravan.
The caravan. Yeah, someone had put out a call for a caravan for a Indigenous elder who lived in Mogo, who'd lost her home, and she was saying that she wanted to just set up a tent on the paddock across the road from where her house was so she could keep an eye on the rebuild. So we put it out there, and this lovely couple from the Sunshine Coast replied and said they had a caravan they were willing to donate, but we just had to get it to Sydney. And no one person could do the whole trip. And so we put out this request, and essentially we ferried it from volunteer to volunteer down the coast. They took it to Byron, someone picked it up in Byron and took it to Newcastle. Someone took it from Newcastle to Sydney, someone took it from Sydney to Wollongong, and then I went down in Wollongong where Bunja Smith, who was the person who had originally put the call out, he came up and picked it up from us in Wollongong. And so it was just this it took about 2 days, and it was just this lovely story. Then other people along the way offered to host it overnight, and every stop people added stuff to it. So by the time we got it to her, it was full. It was full of food and, you know, bedding, and someone added a microwave, and you name it, cleaning supplies, every step along the way, people put more and more into it. So it was able to be delivered to her, and we wound up, I think it was about 8 caravans that we organised in total. But that was the first one, and it was sort of this epic story that a lot of people followed. It was really lovely. We also had really funny stories around finding places for cows. A lot of cows had to be evacuated, and there wasn't really good coordinated help for people who were looking to relocate their cows.
Like herds of cows?
Like 500 cows.
500
and we had to find a place to put 500 cows. And we had multiple lots of cows that we had. And then so one of our amazing volunteer team wound up becoming an expert in like the difference between cattle that have been fire affected and drought affected. And you can't just put fire affected cattle in certain things because their hooves are really sore. And there's all these different, because they walk on the ground when it's still hot and their hooves get burnt.
Wow.
And there's all this stuff around. I think that was it. Yeah.
You just don't understand, do you? You don't. Things are complex.
Had no idea. And the other one that was amazing was there was a 103 or 104-year-old woman whose home burnt down, and we needed to find an accessible place for her to stay. She was still living alone, and they lost their family home, and 2 of the other family members also lost their homes. And yeah, they really needed a place. So we put it out there, and someone came to us, and it just so happened that his sister-in-law had been in a car accident and so was in a long-term recovery facility and had an accessible house while she was in recovery, and this woman could stay there for months. And also if we put up handrails and things, that would actually be quite helpful for the owner once she came back. So then we paid someone to come in and put the handrails in, and so it was all sorts of these very small and specific things, but there was a real gap in addressing that sort of thing at the time.
I've done a lot of work in social innovation. We used to run Social Innovation Sydney with Selena Griffith, and it seems to me like this might be an insight into a better way to do stuff than we do commercially. Sort of the needs markets sort of concept. Maybe there's a startup idea in that somewhere, Annie.
There probably is, but I actually did want to ask you, Erin, after starting Find a Bed, and we're now, a year and a bit later.
Yeah.
Are you still operating it? What are some of the challenges you faced along the way?
We're sort of in hibernation mode at the moment. Fortunately, this year, so we sort of jumped back into work when COVID first hit. We were doing a lot of accommodation for emergency service workers, doctors, frontline workers who had to isolate from their families for medical reasons, but there wasn't a government support yet for hotel stays and the like. So we organised both through fundraising and through our list of people who had offered homes. We organised quite a few places for people to stay. But after that, sort of demand died down a bit. There's quite a bit of work that I really need to do in the back end, setting things up properly. We do want to be ready next time there's a bushfire season and ready to jump back into things. But this is very much I have not prioritised it over the last year.
You're not gearing up for the biblical floods?
Look, it's bound to happen, and I'm probably going to have to go, oh, crap, I'm going to need some help, and everyone has to jump back in again. But Yeah, it's one of those things where I just would love a week of time that I could just put aside and sort everything out, but it's really hard to find.
Well, the interesting thing, because it was necessity was the mother of that invention. You had to do it. Oh, sorry, you didn't have to do it. You chose to do it because you could see that there was a huge gap, and you're like, to Google Sheets people, it's not hard. And then it snowballed, and then you said it, sort of needed a new life when COVID first hit again. But it is going to happen again. And how does your brain deal with that kind of the balancing act of, I'm doing a PhD, I've got a daughter, my father's got neuron disease, and I'm here to support him and be there for my mum, and we live in a shed and it's infested with some mice, because that's the other thing. The mice infestation. Yeah, super fun. It's kind of like you've got more than enough going on.
And I also run my own small business.
Of course, because
I have a little comms consultancy I run on the side. So,
right, yeah,
you're not busy enough. You need.
No, exactly. So you chose to create Find a Bed because you knew that it was necessary and it was needed and it was very much a gap. Yeah. You know it's going to happen again, and yet you're already ridiculously busy. How do you just deal with all the plates that you've got spinning at the same time?
Sometimes not well. Sometimes I drop them. I had a really interesting email. I had a personal trainer for the last year because I was trying to get fitter and stronger, and I got an email from her the other day, a couple of weeks ago, about where she, kind of had a go at me for not being committed.
I saw it on Facebook. It was gobsmacking.
Yes, I'm being gentle. She kind of had a go at me.
Seriously offensive. Are you going to read it?
I can.
You need to see it, Annie. If you haven't heard it, it was.
I haven't seen it.
Offensive. It was a truly offensive email.
Yeah, she sort of said, you're not sticking to your goals, you're not training enough, you have to get exercise in every day. I don't know if this is just if it's a time management issue for you. And I kind of sat on it. I cried at first. I absolutely bawled. And then I kind of sat on it for a day, and then I sent her an email that just said, look, I manage my priorities just fine. They're just not the same as yours. And for me at the moment, exercise, and this was 2 weeks after my grandfather had passed away.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is not my priority right now. And it's something I enjoy and I value, but I'm an adult and sometimes I have to prioritize other things. And I think that's sort of my approach more broadly, that sometimes sometimes I just say, no, this is not the time for this. And I might get a little bit behind in my PhD, or I have to say to a client, I can't pick up this piece of work. I don't have the capacity right now. I also have a partner who is quite understanding and was amazing during Find a Bed, and picked up a whole lot of childcare he wouldn't have been doing otherwise. It would have been more 50-50, where it was not 50-50 when Find a Bed was really busy.
It's an interesting point around it's okay to say no to things, and it's okay to let the plate fall every now and again. It's okay.
Yeah, it doesn't end the world, and occasionally you'll get someone and it does hurt the relationship, but if they're not understanding enough to see that you have to prioritize and you have to make decisions that are consistent with your own values and your own priorities, then it was probably not a great relationship to begin with. No. And that's something I've gotten.
I was just going to say, I hope to see that personal trainer, by the way.
Oh, no, she was sacked that email, like straight away. In fact, when I tweeted it, I said, how to lose a client in one email.
It was really interesting because it was a woman, and it's always a surprise. I don't know why it's always a surprise when it's women, because there's insensitive women too, but it was just really you've got such little EQ that you don't realize this is a completely offensive email to someone whose grandfather's just died. It's just like, really?
And she knew that I had this big assignment for uni, and I'd turned it in on the Friday.
Yeah.
And then she had to go at me on the Sunday for not getting to the gym over the weekend.
Should forget about her and move on, but it's a very good story, I think. I'm really interested in your choice of partner, because he seems to be working out quite well.
Yeah.
It was a really surprising beginning, I know, for the both of you. But how is that going? It seems to be going really well.
Yeah, it's really good, and it just gets better. We had some rough times in the first couple of years. Probably about when Abby was about 2 was probably when it was the hardest so far. But I think we're a good match in terms of personality, and we understand each other pretty well. I'm a big communicator, and I'm a big talk to me about how you're feeling, talk to me about how you're doing, are you okay right now? And he's probably a lot more reticent with that stuff. Oh, I've set Siri off in the background. But we find a really good common ground. We're both people who definitely need alone time. And that works for us too, that we can both say, I just don't want to talk right now. I just want to read a book or watch a movie or that sort of thing. He's also just a really great dad and a really great partner in terms of a partner in raising a kid. And I think that goes a long way too. Plus, I just love him.
That's lovely.
That helps.
Yeah.
I think the choice of one's partner is probably the most important choice in a woman's life. It can affect you for good or ill for a very long time.
Absolutely.
And
it's funny because choice is a funny word with us. Sometimes it didn't feel like a lot of it. I mean, it was a choice to commit to each other, and it was a choice to raise our daughter together. And but sometimes I think that facing that big thing so early in our relationship really gave us a strong foundation.
And you made a choice. You both made a choice, a conscious choice, which is probably as good a way to start anything as any other.
Yeah. But funny story, my car completely died about 2 weeks ago. I was driving Abby to the museum on a Sunday morning, and she needed to go to the bathroom because a child can't go an hour without going to the bathroom. So I pulled off the motorway and went into McDonald's, and my car was working fine. She went to the loo. We came back out. My car wouldn't get out of second gear. And this was my dream car. I'd wanted this car for so long. I dreamt about having a Volkswagen Jetta when I was 13. I finally got one last year. And yeah, wouldn't get out of second. So I drove, parked at the station. We took the train in because you can't tell a 4-year-old that, sorry, the museum trip's not off because mummy's car's not working. We got there just in time, thankfully. But when I came back the next day, picked it up and took it to a local mechanic, they said there was nothing they could do. This car that I bought a year ago was completely, there was nothing. It was going to cost more to fix than it was worth. So
that's absurd.
Yeah, it's a particular thing with this generation of Volkswagens. They have a direct shift gearbox, and when it goes, it goes. So I'd completely, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm a uni student. I'm on uni student money, which is to say not much. And I was really stressed about, because, I'd spent almost $10,000 on this car a year ago, and now it's completely worthless. And then my parents turned around and said, well, we've got money we put aside for your wedding, and we don't think that's going to happen because we've been together 5 years and we've got a kid. So would you like your wedding money to buy a new car? So I did cashed in the shares that they had put aside for a future wedding, and now I have a very daggy Toyota Corolla that will be very cheap to fix, and I like them because they're reliable. So
A good choice.
very sensible. I had my fun car, now I have my sensible car.
And I think this is probably a good place for us to finish. So thanks very much, Erin. It's been lovely talking to you. Nice to see you again, Annie. Lovely to have you back in the time zone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
It is fun. We always enjoy it.